Hello guys, welcome to another great day. In our previous video, we have learned how to trade bullish engulfing pattern. In this video, we'll look at how to trade bearish engulfing pattern. First, how is your trading life going? Good, bad, amazing, painful? Let's talk about this a bit first. Statistics show that 75 to 90% of traders fail to make money. As a trader who has 10 years of experience, I could relate to this. Most of my beginning years were about spending and losing thousands of dollars, with lots of painful memories and stressful times. At many times, I wanted to give up trading. However, in time, with enough practice and patience, things started to change. This is just a journey. There will be lots of failures. It's gonna be a cliche, but in trading, practice is everything. Practice, practice, and practice to gain experience. This is how you do it. Now, let's learn how to trade bearish engulfing candlestick pattern. Bearish engulfing pattern is the exact opposite of the bullish engulfing pattern. This time, the last red candle engulfs the previous smaller green candle. It's just similar and simple. And again, I don't really care about the body or body with the shadows when it engulfs the previous candle. Meaning is much important than the perfect shapes. However, how I use bearish engulfing pattern is much different from how I use a bullish engulfing pattern. In next slide, I'll talk about the meaning of the bearish engulfing pattern. After that, I'll talk about how I use this pattern in my trading life. A key element of a bearish engulfing pattern is exhaustion. In this pattern, buyers, also you can call them bulls, are in control until they hit a resistance or a high supply zone. Buyers are exhausted at this point. You can't keep buying anything forever. There's no more demand. This is why all chart looks like waves. It's just a game between supply and demand, or buyers and sellers. After bearish engulfing pattern forms, we see a bearish action. This could be a trend reversal or another pullback. We can't know exactly. So, how do I enter and exit this trade? How I use it in my trading life? Let's look at that in the next slide. Now, how is this pattern generally used in trading world? Our entry is mostly at close of the red engulfing candle, and our stop loss order is the highest point of the candle. I personally use this pattern to take profit from my long positions or short selling. You may hear the phrase going short sometimes in the trader world. It could be a little complicated for beginners. I'll talk about this in other videos soon. As also a day trader, I use this candlestick pattern to buy put options in 1 or 5 minute charts. However, this is out of scope of this video, and I'll make videos about options for beginners soon. Now, let's look at what else you should check before opening a new position. If I don't use a bearish engulfing pattern to take profits for my long positions, I usually use it on downtrends to open a new position. What do I do is simple. I identify the trend channel and wait for the price to come to upper trend resistance. Then I just check if there's a bearish engulfing pattern. The bearish engulfing pattern confirms that buyers are exhausted and sellers are taking control of the price. This is how supply and demand works. Now, in this example, the downtrend is very clear. The price steadily keeps falling. I want you to tell me where the bearish engulfing pattern is. It's just right in the middle. This is the main setup that I use for my trading. Downtrend channel, check. Bearish engulfing candlestick pattern, check. Sellers are taking control, check. So, how do you enter this trade? Waiting for the red candle to close, then I enter the position. place my stop loss order at the highest point of the candle. Finally, I place a take profit order depending on my risk appetite. Another great way to trade bearish engulfing patterns is sideway trends. What you have to look for is a strong resistance points in the price. These points are generally where the big buyers take profits from their long positions, or a great time for short sellers. Please always check your support and resistance levels daily before entering any kind of trade. So, where's the bearish engulfing pattern in this example? As you notice, it's over here. Now, how do you enter this trade? Wait for the engulfing red candle to close and enter the trade. Simple, isn't it? Then place your stop loss order at the highest point and take profit order wherever you wish. That depends on your risk appetite. This is a good example to take profits for long positions or buying put options. If I was doing a day trading and this was a 5 minutes chart, I would buy put options for a quick profit. Enter and exit instantly under 10 minutes. Don't worry, I'll get on day trading and prepare amazing videos soon. This is all the basics of how to trade bearish engulfing pattern. So, let's check out the apple. First of all, I want you to identify the trend channel. I'm gonna draw it for you. Now, what happens here? The price gradually starts to decline. Buyers are quite exhausted. Sellers are in total control in this chart. And finally, our bearish engulfing pattern is visible just over here. This is a great point for short sellers or buying put options. This is really worth a try. Now, how should I enter this? Always wait for the candle to close, then enter the trade. The next step is placing your stop loss order. And you know how to do it already. Believe me, stop loss orders are lifesavers because no one in the world can know what will happen in the next minute. Sudden lawsuit news, an innovation, or a horrific event in the company. I don't know, anything may happen. This is why every swing trader and investor should use stop loss orders. For day traders, it is an entirely different story. I'll talk about this in the future in other videos. Now, let's watch the trade. Another fine example is PLTR. It's again very similar to Apple. The downtrend is obvious, and as a side note, never ever try to draw perfect shapes, lines, or patterns. Just keep your focus on the meaning of the price action. Keep asking yourself, what is this chart telling me? This is what you should keep your attention every time. And now this chart is telling me that sellers are in control. Price keeps declining. And this bearish engulfing pattern could be a great point for buying put options or going short if you like higher risks. Now, I would like to look at Fuelcell. In this example, the previous candle engulfed is not green. This is not a perfect bearish engulfing pattern. But what did I say? Forget rules, forget perfect shapes, forget exact examples. Just focus to meaning. What does this mean? After a long bullish trend, buyers are tired and sellers step in to take control. A great point to take profits from your long positions. However, I don't like entering a new position with a bearish patterns in a bullish environment. Because generally the trend is your friend, and most of the time you wouldn't want to play against the trend. Bearish engulfing pattern is one of my favorite trading patterns, with the bullish engulfing pattern and some others. I created this rating table which depends on my own trading experience. I can easily say that this was extremely useful in my trading life. Furthermore, I like things those are really simple and minimal. Because believe me, if you start trading, you will want to keep your life simple as much as possible. Otherwise, your life could be a mess. Because learning, researching, and reading are endless in this investment world. It will eat up all your time and life if you try to use every single thing that you learn. Okay folks, this is it for today. I hope that you grasp the basics of how to trade bearish engulfing pattern. I want to repeat one important thing. Never focus on the shapes. Always focus on the meaning of the shapes. This way you'll understand what the buyers and sellers are after. If you can hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, I'll be able to grow this channel much faster, so I can bring you much more free content. Thank you all of you, and see you in the next video.